Something slept in the graveyard of stars. Commander Elias Thorne watched the void from the command deck of the Alliance scout ship Vigil. His reflection, a ghost in the armored transparency, showed a man worn smooth by duty. Outside the Kepler terminus system was a smear of cosmic dust and stellar remnants, a place where suns came to die. The only light was the cold, distant glitter of galaxies that had expired millennia ago. At the heart of this galactic tomb, a signal pulsed with impossible regularity. It was a rhythm too perfect for nature, a whisper in a silent cemetery. Thorne's mission was to find the source of that whisper. The stakes were simple and absolute: learn what it was or ensure nothing else ever could. On the main tactical display, the anomaly was a faint geometric sigil, a fractal of light that hummed in the deep dark. It was the image of a sleeping machine. The bridge of the Vigil was a capsule of controlled quiet, the air tasting of ozone and recycled patience. Anything new from the signal? Jenna Thorne asked, his voice low. His communications officer, Ensign Jana Rosales, shook her head, her focus locked on the cascading data streams. Negative, Commander. Still the same structured pulse. It's not language, sir. It's more like a mathematical proof being broadcast on a loop. Thorne leaned forward, his knuckles resting on the cool metal of the command console. The signal was clean, a stark contrast to the chaotic energies of the surrounding nebula. It was a beacon of pure order in a universe that favored decay. His executive officer, Kalen, approached from the sensor station, his expression grim. We're not alone, Elias. Long-range resonance scans show multiple signatures converging on our position. They're running dark, but their drive plumes are sloppy. Thorne's eyes narrowed. Inheritors, Kalen nodded. Their energy profiles match. At least 3 scavenger hulks and what looks like a converted asteroid miner. They're coming for the same thing we are. The inheritors of the void were a nomadic cult of scavengers, picking at the bones of fallen civilizations. They saw ancient technology not as something to be understood, but as a prize to be cracked open and plundered. They were vultures circling a tomb. What's your projection? Solitude, Thorne asked, addressing the ship's integrated AI. A calm, synthesized voice emanated from the bridge speakers. The Inheritor fleet holds a 73% advantage in raw firepower. Their tactical doctrine is unpredictable, favoring brute force. Direct confrontation is ill-advised. Thorne's jaw tightened. The Vigil was a scout built for speed and observation, not a brawl. They don't know we're here yet. Keep us in the nebula's shadow. I want to see what they do when they reach the signal's source. He trusted his ship and his crew, but he trusted the enemy's greed even more. The Inheritor ships tumbled out of faster-than-light travel in a blast of dirty radiation. They were ugly vessels patched together from the scrap of a dozen forgotten wars. Their comms channels crackled to life, unfiltered and arrogant. They spoke of a first-age relic and the glory of the unmaking, their fanaticism a raw, grating noise in the dignified silence of the terminus. They began to probe the anomaly, immediately bathing the area in aggressive sensor sweeps and low-grade plasma bursts. Their methods were crude, the technological equivalent of kicking a locked door. The anomaly, however, did not react. The steady mathematical pulse continued without a single deviation. It was the heartbeat of something immensely patient. From the mess hall of a listening post, 3 systems away, 2 off-duty technicians watched a delayed feed of the Kepler terminus. Another ghost signal, one of them said, stirring a cup of nutrient paste. Probably just a pulsar with a weird magnetic field. The other leaned closer, intrigued by the faint sigil on the screen. I don't know. That one feels different. It's too clean. They were watching echoes, unaware that they were the first civilian witnesses to a moment that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. Their casual conversation was the last moment of normalcy before history turned a page. On the vigil, Jenna's console chimed. Commander, the anomaly is responding to their scans. Not with a signal, but with a field. A new layer of data bloomed on the tactical display. A localized distortion bubble was forming around the source, a perfect sphere of warped space-time. The Inheritors' sensor beams struck the field and bent away harmlessly, their energy redirected into the void. Fascinating Solitude stated. The field's geometry is reactive. It is not a static shield. It is a tailored mathematical countermeasure. It is not blocking them. It is proving them irrelevant. Kalen crossed his arms, his skepticism warring with grudging respect. It's a fancy way of telling them to get lost. The silence had become a shield. Thorn saw his opening. The Inheritors were focused on a problem they could not solve with force. He had a chance to try a different key. Jaina opened a narrow beam channel to the source. Solitude. I want you to answer the broadcast. Kalen took a step forward. Elias, what are you doing? Talking to it could give away our position and our capabilities. Thorn kept his eyes on the tactical display. Their approach is a hammer. They see a nail. But that signal isn't a lock to be broken. It's a question. It deserves an answer. His decision was a calculated risk, a bet on intelligence over instinct. The query is a complex ethical problem, Solitude elaborated as it prepared the transmission. It presents a scenario involving the allocations of limited resources between two developing civilizations, one of which exhibits aggressive expansionist tendencies. A direct answer requires a declaration of core doctrine. This was the test. It wasn't asking for the right answer. It was asking for the legal and moral framework used to find an answer. It wanted to see their work the foundational logic that defined them. His command was a question, not an order. We can't just send them the Alliance Compact, Kalen argued. That's classified. It would expose our protocols, our rules of engagement. Thorn turned to face his XO. The Compact is our best self, Kalen. It's the document that holds us to a higher standard. If we can't stand by it now when it matters most, then what is it worth? He saw the conflict in Kalen's eyes, the duty to protect secrets versus the duty to do the right thing. It was a tension Thorn knew well. He made the choice. We won't send them a summary. We're not applying for a job. We will send them everything. The compact, the historical precedents, the legal debates, the minority dissents. Let it judge us on the totality of our law. The transmission was a tightly focused beam of data, a whisper of light aimed at the heart of the anomaly. It was an offering of trust in a place of death and decay. For a moment, nothing happened. The Inheritor fleet continued their futile assault on the distortion field, their frustration escalating into rage. Their lead ship, a brutal-looking vessel named Absolution's Gaze, began charging its main weapon, a spinal-mounted particle lance. They had decided that if they could not open the prize, they would shatter it. Then the anomaly's pulse changed. The steady rhythm faltered, paused, and then resumed with a deeper, more resonant hum. A verdict had been reached. The distortion field around the anomaly suddenly expanded. It did not explode outwards. It simply grew serene and unstoppable. The wave of warped space-time washed over the Inheritor fleet. It did no damage, but it gently and inexorably pushed their ships back, tumbling them out of weapons range. Their particle lance discharged, but the beam harmlessly bent around the sphere. It was the calm, firm hand of a giant setting aside a child's tantrum. The scavengers were powerless, their aggression rendered completely impotent. Their comms channels filled with panicked shouts and curses. Then a new path opened. A narrow, stable corridor materialized in the distortion field, a clear lane leading directly to the source. It was a channel of calm in a storm of confused energy. "The invitation is for us." Jenna breathed, her voice filled with awe. Solitude confirmed it. "The corridor's entrance is aligned directly with our position. All other vectors remain closed. Probability of safe passage 99.9%. Thorn took a deep breath, the recycled air suddenly feeling crisp and new. "Take us in, Kalen," slowly and respectfully. The Vigil glided forward, leaving the fuming Inheritor fleet behind. They were entering a place that had been sealed for an unimaginable length of time. The anchor had set its own shore. As they moved down the corridor, the ambient temperature on the bridge dropped by a few degrees. The light from the anomaly grew brighter, resolving into a single, massive object. It was a ship. But it was a ship like a mountain is a rock. Its scale was breathtaking, dwarfing anything the Alliance had ever built. The hull was forged from a crystalline material that was not black, but an absence of light drinking in the faint starlight without reflection. Its design was angular and severe, a statement of purpose written in silent, ancient architecture. It was a cathedral built for war. "Its energy readings are minimal, almost entirely dormant," Kalen reported, his voice hushed. "But the material—" "Solitude, can you identify it?" The AI's synthesized voice held a new, unfamiliar tone of deep analysis. "Negative. The hull composition does not match any known element or alloy. It appears to be a form of stabilized exotic matter. The stresses it could withstand are, theoretically, infinite." The ship was an artifact from a lost age of humanity, a time when their command of physics was a thing of legend. As they drew closer, Thorn and his crew discussed the nature of the intelligence they had contacted. Solitude provided a crucial insight. Its methods are archival, not coercive. This intelligence teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It was a keeper of records, not a wielder of chains. A sleeping giant was considering their petition. Finally, they came to a stop before the vessel's prow. A single sigil glowed there with a soft, internal luminescence. It was the same fractal anchor they had seen from afar. Then a signal touched their ship. It was not a broadcast. It was a direct resonant query that vibrated through the Vigil's hull and interfaced directly with Solitude and Thorn's command implant. There was no sound, only a pure conceptual transmission of meaning. It was one simple, profound question. "State your precedent. By what law do you stand?" The query was the final key. It was not asking for a statute or a military code. It was asking for the fundamental principle that gave them the right to be there. Thorn felt the weight of that question, the gaze of a forgotten history upon him. His doubts had been burned away by the journey, replaced by a nascent sense of stewardship. He knew that the answer he gave would define not just his mission, but humanity's future relationship with its own past. He looked at the ancient, silent ship, a monument to a power his civilization had yet to reclaim. He did not reply with the Alliance Compact or the Articles of War. He reached deeper to the very core of what it meant to be human, to be a guardian in a dangerous cosmos. He focused his intent, shaping the response through his command implant, a direct transmission from mind to machine. "We stand by the law that the innocent shall not be made to suffer for the ambitions of the guilty," he sent. "We stand to protect the archive, not to claim the weapon." The ledger had accepted the entry. For a long second, the silence of the void returned deeper and more absolute than before. The inheritors had ceased their useless tantrum, watching from a distance as history held its breath. Then, on the ancient vessel, a change began. Deep within its dark hull, lights started to flicker on. They were not the harsh, functional lights of a modern warship. but a warm, steady glow that spread from section to section. It was like watching a city wake at dawn. A low, resonant thrum began to emanate from the ship, a vibration so deep it was felt more in the bones than in the ears. The immense engines, cold for countless millennia, were drawing power from the very fabric of space-time. The sigil on the prow flared its soft luminescence, intensifying into a brilliant, steady beacon of lawful authority. The fractal patterns within it shifted, locking into a new configuration. It was no longer a query. It was a declaration. The great silent warship, the archive of a forgotten age, was awake. Its name, a piece of data held in its core archives, and now shared with the vigil, blossomed in Thorn's mind. It was the Obsidian Anchorage, and it was now under his care. Aboard a small freighter drifting near a trade outpost, a young girl pressed her face against the viewport, looking at the star charts her father had projected onto the glass. She traced the outline of the Kepler terminus, a region marked with warnings and pirate alerts. "Is it scary in there, Papa?" she asked. Her father, a grizzled cargo hauler, smiled and put a hand on her shoulder. "It's just empty space, little starling. Nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing out there but dust and ghosts." He could not have been more wrong. The ghosts were waking up. The Inheritor fleet watched as the ancient vessel came alive. Their initial shock was quickly replaced by a renewed surge of avarice and fury. Their leader, a zealot who called himself the Prime Conduit, snarled from the bridge of Absolution's gaze. "It has a keeper now. The relic has chosen the weak. It matters not. We will break them both and take what is ours by right of entropy." He gave the order to advance to test the boundaries of the newly awakened power. Their engines flared, pushing against the gentle but firm pressure of the distortion field. They were determined to lay siege to the past. On the bridge of the Vigil, alarms chimed as the Inheritor fleet began its advance. "They're trying to collapse the corridor," Kalen announced, his voice tight. "They're focusing fire on the projectors. They think they can cut us off and trap us in here." Thorn stood firm, his gaze fixed on the magnificent form of the Obsidian Anchorage. "Solitude, open a channel to the anchorage. Let's see what our new friend can do." The AI's response was immediate. "The connection is already established, Commander. The anchorage is quiescent. It appears to be awaiting your command." It was a sword waiting for a hand. Thorn felt a tremor of uncertainty. He was a scout commander, not the admiral of a mythical warship. The sheer scale of the power at his disposal was staggering. But the question from the anchorage had clarified his purpose. He was not its master. He was its steward. His duty was to uphold the precedent he had set. Anchorage, he began, the name feeling strange and momentous on his tongue. "The fleet outside is hostile, Mual. They intend to seize you by force to silence your archives. I will not allow that. But I will not order you to destroy them." He paused, choosing his words with the care of a diplomat, signing a universe-altering treaty. "We are bound by the law of proportional response. They have not yet taken a life. We will not be the first to do so. We will demonstrate our resolve. We will enforce our boundary. But we will not become the aggressors." It was a declaration of intent, a command that was also a promise. He was teaching the ancient weapon the laws of its new era. The teaching had begun. The Obsidian Anchorage responded. Its immense hull shimmered, and thousands of small panels shifted, revealing emitter arrays that glowed with a soft, golden light. It did not power up weapons. It did not launch fighters. Instead, it began to manipulate the very fabric of the distortion field. The gentle bubble that had protected it began to change its geometry, becoming more complex, more active. The pressure against the Inheritor fleet increased, but it remained a non-destructive force. It was a boundary becoming a wall. The prime conduit of the inheritors screamed in frustration. More tricks, more games, full power to the disruptors. I want that field torn apart molecule by molecule. His ships poured energy into their assault, their desperation making them reckless. But their disruptor beams designed to tear apart armored hulls had no effect on the field. The energy they projected was simply absorbed, drawn into the shimmering bubble and held. The field began to glow brighter, energized by the very attack meant to destroy it. A mirror was being forged from their rage. Gina's eyes went wide as she read the energy telemetry. Commander, the anchorage is capturing their weapon discharges. It's storing the energy. The field is acting like a capacitor. A very, very large one. Thorn allowed himself a thin smile. This was the genius of the ancients. Not a bigger gun, but a smarter shield. It was a system that turned an enemy's strength into a liability. It was a perfect, lawful defense. It did not escalate. It simply absorbed. The more the inheritors attacked, the stronger the defense became. Suddenly, the inheritors' assault faltered. Their lead ships began to overheat their power conduits, straining to keep up with the massive energy draw of their own weapons. Warning lights flashed across their bridges. They were fighting themselves, draining their own reserves against an opponent that only grew stronger from the conflict. Their tactical discipline is breaking down. Kalen observed a note of satisfaction in his voice. They're not a real military. They're a mob. And this thing is showing them what happens when a mob meets the law. The debt was being recorded. Thorn knew this stalemate could not last forever. The inheritors were fanatics. They would sacrifice their ships, their lives, for a chance at their prize. He had to give them a way out, an off-ramp that preserved his principles while ensuring the safety of the anchorage. He had to make them understand that this was a battle they had already lost, not on a material level, but on a philosophical one. He had to give them a final, undeniable lesson. Solitude, can the anchorage project an image, he asked. The AI processed the query. The capability is present. Its emitter arrays are capable of precise holographic generation on a vast scale. Thorn nodded. Good. Project an image into the space directly in front of the inheritor fleet. I want them to see something. I want them to see what they are trying to profane. He described the image. He wanted a simple but powerful symbol of what the anchorage represented. A lesson was about to be given. Moments later, a colossal image formed in the void. It was not a weapon. It was not a threat. It was a book. An immense open ledger, its pages filled with the flowing script of light. The mathematical proofs the anchorage had once broadcast now scrolled across its pages, interwoven with the articles of the Alliance Compact that Thorn had sent. It was a visual representation of law of knowledge, of the very principles the inheritors sought to tear down in their pursuit of raw power. It was a statement that this was a place of learning, not of loot. At the same time, a new line of text began to write itself across the top of the ledger. It appeared in the crude, blocky script of the inheritor's own language, a direct translation provided by the Vigil's linguistic databases. It was a simple accounting. It listed each of their ships by name. Next to each name, it showed the exact amount of energy they had fired into the distortion field. And next to that, it showed the same amount of energy now held in storage by the anchorage. It was a receipt for their own aggression. Their violence was now a liability on a balance sheet. The prime conduit stared at the glowing ledger, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. The audacity of it was an insult to his faith. A trick, a light show. Do they think we are children to be scared by ghost stories? But his crews were not so sure. They could see their own energy reserves dwindling. They could feel the heat building in their reactors. The numbers on the great ledger were not a trick. They were a direct reflection of their own failing systems. A murmur of doubt began to spread through the Inheritor fleet. Thorn seized the moment. Jaina, open a broad channel to the Inheritor fleet. All ships, unencrypted. Sir, she asked, surprised. The order went against every standard protocol for engagement. They need to hear it from a human voice, Thorn said. They need to understand that this isn't some automated system. It's a choice. Jenna complied, her fingers flying across her console. The channel was open. The static of the void filled the bridge. Thorn took a breath and began to speak, his voice calm and steady, broadcast across the silent battlefield. A voice of reason entered the madness. This is Commander Elias Thorn of the Alliance scout ship Vigil. You are trespassing in a protected archival territory. The vessel you are attacking, the Obsidian Anchorage, is a non-combatant entity under our stewardship. It is a library, not an armory. He let the words hang in the silence, a stark contrast to the religious fervor of the Prime Conduit. The energy you have expended has been recorded. It will not be used against you. It will be returned to you peacefully once you have withdrawn to a safe distance. He was offering them a way out. An honorable retreat. He was treating them not as enemies to be vanquished, but as a misguided party that had made a severe error in judgment. He was upholding the law even with those who sought to live outside it. You have a choice, he concluded. Leave in peace or continue this pointless assault and disable your own vessels through power exhaustion. We will not fire upon you. The choice is yours. The transmission ended. The great ledger continued to glow, the numbers ticking up with every last desperate shot a few of the Inheritor ships fired. Their own actions were their only enemy. The Prime Conduit was apoplectic. He lies. It is a trap. The Alliance only understands strength. They are trying to lure us into dropping our guard. All ships prepare to overload your reactors and focus the blast. If we cannot have the relic, no one will, but his command was met with silence. His captains, faced with the undeniable truth on their power displays, and the calm, rationale offer from the Alliance commander, refused the order. One by one, their weapon ports closed. Their engines shifted from combat to standby. The assault was over. Aboard the Vigil. Kalen let out a slow, controlled breath. I'll be damned, Elias. You beat them without firing a single shot. Thorn felt no triumph, only a quiet, profound sense of relief. He had held to his principles. He had proven that the law could be a shield, not just a sword. The Obsidian Anchorage had given him the tool, but the choice of how to use it had been his. The ancient ship and the modern commander were in perfect sync. The precedent had been tested and held. The Inheritor fleet, fractured and demoralized, began to turn away. Their ships, limping and low on power, slunk back into the darkness of the nebula. The Absolution's gaze was the last to leave the Prime Conduit, firing one last defiant curse over the comms before vanishing into the void. The battle was won. Thorn watched them go, knowing this was only the beginning. The existence of the Obsidian Anchorage was now known. Others would come. Some would be like him, seeking to learn. Others would be like the Inheritors, seeking to plunder. He turned his attention back to the magnificent vessel before him. The great holographic ledger faded away. The distortion field contracted, becoming a thin, shimmering veil of protection. The Obsidian Anchorage was at rest once more, its internal lights glowing with a steady, watchful warmth. It was a silent sentinel, a keeper of forgotten truths. Thorn's mission had changed. He was no longer just a scout. He was the guardian of a legacy, the first student in a school that had been closed for millions of years. The weight of that responsibility was immense, but for the first time in a long time, Elias Thorne felt a sense of profound and unwavering purpose. The graveyard of stars was no longer a tomb. It was a classroom, and the first lesson was about to begin. The bridge of the vigil was silent for a long time, the only sound the gentle thrum of its own life support. Kalen was the first to speak, his voice a low rumble of disbelief. It listened. Not just to you, but to them. It gave them a choice. Thorne nodded, his gaze still fixed on the colossal shape of the obsidian anchorage. It's a creature of law, Kalen. It doesn't understand malice. It only understands action and consequence. The ancient ship was more than a weapon. It was a mirror. It had shown the inheritors a perfect reflection of their own futility. Commander Jaina said, her voice pulling him from his thoughts. The anchorage is requesting a formal interface. It wants to establish a record. Thorne straightened up, the weight of command settling back onto his shoulders. This was the next step, the true first contact. He was not a conqueror claiming a prize. He was a petitioner before a court that had been in recess for eons. Solitude facilitate the connection. Full sensory access on my command chair. I want to understand what this is. His order was one of curiosity, not conquest. The archive was opening its doors. The interface was not a stream of data. It was a feeling, a conceptual immersion. Thorne felt the history of the anchorage wash over him, not as a story, but as a vast, silent library of legal code and cosmic precedent. He saw the rise and fall of forgotten human empires, each judged by their own laws. He saw stellar engineering projects on a scale that defied imagination, all governed by contracts of mind-boggling complexity. The ship was not a warship in the way the Alliance understood it. It was a mobile courthouse, a constitutional anchor designed to drift through the void and serve as the ultimate impartial arbiter. Its weapons were not for conquest, but for enforcing its judgments. Solitude's synthesized voice cut through the immersive experience, providing context. Commander, the anchorage identifies its primary function as a bearer of precedent. Its purpose is to record the defining legal and ethical choices of civilizations. It observes, it archives, and when a valid petitioner presents a case, it enforces the established law. Thorne understood. The mathematical broadcast had been a summons. His transmission of the Alliance Compact had been his legal petition. His handling of the inheritors had been his first case, and he had won. A judgment had become a partnership. Sir, multiple high-energy FTL signatures just dropped into the system's outer edge. Kalen's sharp voice sliced through the quiet. Their alliance. Heavy cruisers. It's Admiral Corvin's task force. Thorne's connection to the anchorage severed as he focused on the tactical display. 3 sleek, powerful Alliance warships, the Indomitable, the Resolution, and the Stalwart, were burning hard towards their position. They were not a rescue party. They were a statement of authority. Admiral Corvin was known throughout the fleet as a man who valued order and control above all else. He was a legalist, but his interpretation of the law was rigid and unforgiving. "He's hailing us," Gina reported, her brow furrowed with concern. Priority 1. Encryption. Admiral's eyes only. Thorne sighed. The battle for the anchorage was not over. It had simply changed from a fight against chaos to a struggle against control. On screen. The face of Admiral Marcus Corvin materialized on the main viewer. He was a man carved from granite, his eyes holding the cold certainty of someone who had never once questioned his own authority. "Commander Thorne," he began, his voice devoid of warmth. "You have committed a grave breach of protocol. You have activated a first-age artifact without authorization and transmitted classified Alliance doctrine to an unknown entity. By the authority of Sector Command, you are to stand down and relinquish control of the artifact to me immediately. The law had arrived, and it wore a different face. Thorn stood his ground, the calm of the anchorage still echoing in his mind. Admiral, with all due respect, this vessel is not an artifact to be controlled. It is a sentient legal entity that has accepted me as its steward based on the very doctrines you seek to protect. Corvin's lip curled in a sneer. Steward. It's a weapon, Commander. A weapon of unimaginable power that you have no right to command. Your sentimentality is a threat to Alliance security. I will not ask again. Power down your systems and prepare to be boarded. The transmission cut out, leaving a heavy silence on the bridge. Kalen turned to Thorn, his face pale. Elias, he's serious. He will see this as an act of insurrection. We can't fight a fleet of heavy cruisers. Thorn looked from the cold, professional warships of the Alliance to the ancient, silent majesty of the anchorage. He had given his word his precedent. He had promised to protect the archive, to hand it over to a man like Corvin, who would see it only as a hammer, would be a betrayal of that law. We won't fight them, Thorn said quietly. We will teach them. A new case was being brought before the court. In a crowded public forum on the Alliance capital world, a live debate was raging. News of the Kepler relic had leaked, and speculation was rampant. This is a moment of unparalleled discovery. A historian argued, her eyes bright with excitement. A chance to understand our own past, our own forgotten greatness. A military analyst countered, his tone grim. It is an unconstrained strategic variable. In the hands of a rogue commander, it is the greatest threat we have ever faced. It must be contained. The citizens of the Alliance were divided, their hopes and fears projected onto the silent ship in a dead star system. Admiral Corvin's fleet is taking up a blockade formation, Gina reported, her voice tense. They are positioning themselves to cut off any potential escape route. They are not broadcasting any further demands. They are simply waiting. Thorn paced the bridge, his mind racing. Corvin was a patient man. He would not fire on an Alliance vessel without extreme provocation. He would wait for Thorn to make a mistake. He would build a legal case for his actions, brick by brick, until he had the justification he needed to seize control. He was trying to win the same way Thorn had by the law. The standoff was a contest of legal wills. He is testing our resolve, Solitude observed. His strategy is sound. He will use logistics against us. The vigil requires fuel and supplies. He believes he can wait until our position is untenable. Thorn knew the AI was right. He was in a siege, and his opponent was the very institution he had sworn to serve. He needed to change the nature of the engagement to move the conflict to a venue where Corvin's military advantage was irrelevant. He needed to present a new kind of evidence. Solitude. Does the anchorage have detailed sensor logs of this system's history? Thorn asked, a new plan beginning to form in his mind. It does, the AI confirmed. Its memory is functionally perfect. It has recorded every significant energy event in this sector for the last 60 million years. Thorn's eyes drifted to a part of the tactical map he had noticed earlier, a vast ruined structure orbiting the system's primary neutron star. It was a fragment of a Dyson ring, another relic of the First Age, shattered and inert. Tell me about the ring, Thorn said, and tell me about the star it orbits. A new page in the ledger was being turned. The data flowed into Thorn's command chair. The Dyson ring had been a marvel of engineering, but it had been destroyed by an instability in the neutron star it was built to contain. The star itself, a pulsar, was in a state of decay, prone to unpredictable and violent energy flares. One such flare was what had crippled the ring millennia ago. According to the anchorage's long-term projections, another even larger flare was imminent. It was a ticking time bomb at the heart of the system. When Thorn asked, The probability of a cascade event reaches 98% within the next 72 hours, Solitude replied. Thorn saw his path. It was a terrible risk, but it was the only one he had. Jaina, open a channel to Admiral Corvin. I want him to have the anchorage's full projection data on the pulsar. Everything. Unfiltered. Kalen stared at him aghast. Elias, you're giving him a weapon. He'll use this against you. He'll say you're withholding vital intelligence. No, Thorn countered. I'm giving him a choice. A test. Just like the anchorage gave me one. He can be a commander or he can be a jailer. We're about to find out which one he is. The evidence had been presented to the opposing council. Aboard the indomitable Admiral Corvin watched the data from the anchorage stream across his tactical display. The projections were terrifyingly precise. The impending pulsar flare would be catastrophic, a wave of hard radiation that would sterilize the entire system and send a lethal surge of energy toward the nearby Hyperion trade route. Thousands of civilian lives would be at risk. His tactical officer turned to him. Admiral, this changes everything. We have to act. We can't contain this with our shield technology. Corvin's eyes were fixed on the position of the obsidian anchorage. He saw not a partner in a crisis, but a tool waiting to be used. It is a trick, Corvin said, his voice a low growl. Thorn is trying to force my hand to make me acknowledge his command of that weapon. He wants me to ask for his help. A cold smile touched his lips. So be it. We will solve this crisis. But we will do it my way. He turned to his communications officer. Get me a line to the Alliance High Command. Inform them that Commander Thorn is hoarding the power of a First-Age artifact while a major civilian catastrophe looms. I am formally petitioning for the authority to use any means necessary to secure the artifact and avert this disaster. He was using the law as a cudgel. Thorn knew what Corvin would do before the message even arrived. The Admiral was predictable. He would escalate using the crisis to justify his power grab. He's not going to help, Kalen said, his voice grim. He's going to let the disaster happen to prove his point. He's not going to let it happen, Thorn corrected. He is going to make it happen. On the tactical display, a new development occurred. One of Corvin's cruisers, the Resolution, was breaking formation. It was moving not towards the Vigil, but towards the unstable pulsar. What is he doing? Gina whispered. Solitude provided the chilling answer. The Resolution is plotting a torpedo launch. The target is not a vessel. It is a strategically selected fragment of the Dyson ring. The resulting kinetic impact will destabilize the pulsar's magnetic field, triggering the flare event ahead of schedule. Corvin wasn't just waiting for the crisis. He was starting it. He was engineering a catastrophe so that he could be seen as the only one who could solve it, justifying his seizure of the anchorage. It was a monstrous, cynical gambit. The accusation had become a self-fulfilling prophecy. He's insane, Kalen breathed. He's going to kill thousands of people to win an argument. Thorn's face was set like stone. He had hoped to teach Corvin. Now he had to stop him. But how he could not fire on an Alliance ship? That would make him the villain Corvin already believed him to be. He had to find another way, a solution that was not a weapon. He turned his thoughts to the anchorage. The ring, the flare. This has happened before. Did the archive record how the builders of the ring controlled the star? The answer from the anchorage was immediate and profound. It was not a technical schematic. It was a lesson in physics, a set of equations that described how to harmonize with the pulsar's energy, not contain it. The builders had not used shields to block the star's power. They had used immense gravitational lenses woven from the system's own dust and debris to channel and redirect it. They had turned a weapon into an engine. They had answered violence with creation. The mirror showed a path forward. "We can't build a Dyson ring," Kalen said, his voice flat with despair. "It would take centuries." "We don't have to," Thorne replied, a fierce light in his eyes. "We have the anchorage. It remembers how." He turned to the empty space on his bridge. "Anchorage, I petition for a judgment. A hostile force is using the law to create chaos. He is turning a star into a weapon to threaten the innocent. I ask you to enforce the precedent, not with violence but with the tools of creation. Show them the true meaning of power." The court was called to order. As the Resolution's torpedoes sped toward the Dyson fragment, the obsidian anchorage began to move. It did not power its engines. It simply altered its relationship with gravity. The colossal ship glided silently and impossibly fast toward the ruined ring, the vigil still attached to its side like a pilot fish on a great whale. At the same time, the thousands of emitters on its hull lit up not with the golden light of the defensive field, but with a brilliant silver luminescence. Beams of pure force erupted from the ship, not striking at Corvin's fleet, but reaching out into the vast clouds of dust and debris that filled the Kepler terminus. Like the hands of a million invisible giants, the force emitters began to gather matter. Asteroids, cometary ice, and metallic dust were pulled from their lazy orbits. They were not simply collected. They were sorted, refined, and woven together. The obsidian anchorage was not preparing for a fight. It was preparing to build. On the bridge of the indomitable Admiral Corvin watched in stunned silence. He had expected a shield. He had expected a laser. He had not expected a construction yard to erupt in the middle of his battlefield. A ledger of matter was being balanced. The torpedoes struck. The Dyson fragment shattered, and the pulsar, its delicate magnetic balance broken, began to heave. A colossal wave of energy, a wall of radiation and exotic particles erupted from its surface, screaming outward at a measurable fraction of the speed of light. The flare had begun. It was even more violent than the projections had predicted. Corvin had his catastrophe, but his eyes were glued to the anchorage. The ancient ship had positioned itself directly between the dying star and the distant Hyperion trade route. It was a shield, but a shield of an entirely new kind. The collected matter was being spun into vast shimmering lenses of ice and refined metals. They were gossamer thin, but miles wide, arranged in a precise, overlapping lattice. The anchorage was building the very system the ancients had used, but on a smaller emergency scale. It was not blocking the flare. It was preparing to catch it, to tame it. As the wall of energy struck the first lens, it did not shatter. The lens bent its crystalline structure, channeling the raw fury of the star. The energy was focused, redirected to the next lens, and the next, its chaotic rage being systematically ordered. Their violence was being reforged into order. The energy that emerged from the final lens was no longer a wave of destruction. It was a focused, coherent beam of pure power, a river of light that flowed harmlessly into the empty void away from all civilian life. The anchorage had taken the full, unrestrained fury of a collapsing star and turned it into a work of art. The cost of this monumental effort was visible. The emitters on the anchorage's hull flickered, and a deep, resonant hum vibrated through the vigil, the sound of immense power being strained to its absolute limit. The heat sinks on the ancient ship glowed a dull, cherry red, bleeding thermal energy into the void. On the vigil's bridge, a secondary wave of gravitational distortion washed over them, a side effect of the massive energies being manipulated. The ship groaned, and a power conduit overloaded with a shower of sparks, plunging half the bridge into emergency lighting. Gina cried out as her console shorted out, her hands recoiling from the sudden shock. The ship was wounded but alive. The cost was real, tangible, but they had held. They had turned the tide. A price had been paid for the lesson. Admiral Corvin stood motionless, his reflection staring back at him from his command screen. He saw not a commander, but a fool. His perfect legal trap had been answered with an act of creation so profound it defied his understanding of the universe. He had brought a gun to an argument about the nature of architecture. The comm channel from Alliance High Command chimed, and he answered it with the deadened reflexes of a defeated man. He did not need to hear the orders. He already knew. His career was over. His worldview was shattered. He had lost the case. In the aftermath, the system was transformed. The pulsar was still dying, but its death throes had been tamed. The great temporary structure of lenses slowly broke apart. Its purpose served. The obsidian anchorage cooled its systems, the red glow of its heat sinks, fading back to the calm, absolute black of its hull. It returned to its silent vigil, its point made without a single word or a single shot. The Alliance, in awe and no small amount of fear, had its answer. The reports from Corvin's own crew, combined with the vigil's logs, painted a picture not of a rogue commander, but of a man who had understood a truth his superiors could not. A new law had been written in light and gravity. Thorn stood on the bridge of the vigil, watching the starscape. A formal decree from the Alliance Senate had been transmitted hours ago. The Thorn precedent was now law. Any sentient artifact of the First Age was to be approached not with force but with petition. Stewardship, not ownership, was now the guiding principle. The Kepler terminus was declared an interdicted zone, a place of study under the sole authority of Commander Elias Thorn and his crew, pending further understanding. He was no longer a rebel. He was a pioneer. Kalen stood beside him, a new respect in his eyes. "You showed them, Elias. You showed them all." Thorn shook his head. "We didn't show them anything. The anchorage did. It simply reminded us of a part of ourselves we had forgotten. That the ultimate authority isn't the one who can give the most orders. It's the one who can build the best future." He looked at the ancient ship, his partner in this strange and momentous dance. The responsibility was terrifying, but the clarity of purpose it gave him was a gift beyond any measure. On the core interface of the obsidian anchorage, in a silent language of light and logic, a new line of precedent was inscribed in its eternal ledger. It detailed the actions of the inheritors, the gambit of Admiral Corvin, and the creative, lawful response it had been petitioned to enact. It was the first new entry in 60 million years. We have slept long enough to forget what power truly is. It is not the force to break worlds, but the wisdom to mend them. It is not found in a clenched fist, but in an open hand. We sought a weapon and found a teacher. And its first lesson was this: the law is not a chain to bind others, but a scaffold upon which to build a better tomorrow for all who choose to live within it. The anchorage held.